Hey folks, welcome back. How wide should your stance be? I get this question, or I ask this question a lot, and I get a wide range of answers, and there's a couple big misconceptions that I think people misunderstand, which I think can affect the way that their body moves, and there's also one thing that I really want to stop hearing people say. Let's dive into it. Today's topic is all about stance width. So the first thing that I want to say before we start is today I'm just talking about full swings. When we start to hit wedges and different things like that, our stance width will vary, and it can honestly vary from the type of short game shot we're trying to hit. But today I'm just talking full swing shots off the tee into the green. That's a topic that I want to dive into. And the thing that I said that I want people to stop saying is when I ask them what their stance width should be, they all say about shoulder width apart. Okay, great. That's the thing we've been told forever. The thing that I asked him is I said, okay, well, if we were to measure it, how wide should it be? How wide should your stance be? And I often get a bunch of, I don't know. So what I often do, and I have one here in my teaching bag, is I have measuring tape. And I will just very quickly measure the outside of their shoulders. And it's common for players, and obviously depends on size, but a shoulder width that I see a lot is something that is, let's say 14 to 17, somewhere in that range. My shoulders are 16 inches wide. I see a lot of people around 17 inches as well. So I just flat out measure what their shoulder width is. So I said, okay, so your stance width should be roughly 17 inches wide. And then what I have them do is I have them set up to a golf shot, and then I measure their feet. In my case, I would say that probably easily over 50% of golfers have stances that are too narrow. And when I give them that example, one thing that is very common is I will have someone that I'll have a shoulder width of, let's call it 16 inches. And then what they do is they get set up to a golf shot, and I see this. And what they've done is they've set up the outside of their feet in line with the outside of their shoulders. When I interpret stance width, I want the inside of your feet matching the outside of your shoulders, not inside to inside. And the reason why I don't want inside to inside is because the angle that our leg ends up at. Because the first thing I do when I look at someone's stance width is I'll look at the angle of their leg. And if I have a player that stance is very narrow, usually what happens is their leg, like their entire leg, will end up looking like it's almost 90 degrees. And for a lot of players, that's too narrow. And the number one reason why is if you struggle with sway or slide in your golf swing, oftentimes the stance width, especially sway in the backswing, stance width is the number one reason why. Because when I have a player that gets set up with a stance that's too narrow, and this left leg is basically just here sitting up and down, straight up and down, as soon as they go to put pressure into that trail side, as soon as they start to make a backswing, what happens is their knee gets outside their trail foot, and now they've swayed off the golf ball. What we need when we look at stance width, like why does my stance width matter? Because we need a little bit of angle when we look at our leg. And that angle that we're looking for in our legs provides us something to turn into or to apply pressure into without swaying or sliding. If I have a very narrow stance and I start to get pressure into my trail side, it doesn't take long where I start to move and I've got weight on the outside of that trail foot, and I'm in real big trouble. But if I get a stance width that is a little bit wider, what happens now is I have a little bit of angle here. And as I start to rotate and apply some pressure inside my trail leg as I make a backswing, I can still maintain it on the inside of my trail foot. So an easy way to summarize it, I don't want your legs to look like they're straight up and down. There needs to be some angle. Let's measure our shoulders. And then the next thing that we can do is actually measure out what our stance width should be. There's a training aid that I use a lot, and actually the other guys who teach it use a lot as well. It's called the DownUnder Board. And there's two different types, but what I like is this one is set for, I'm going to take my measuring tape out here and prove it to you that I'm not making this up, 16 inches wide, almost like it's a common number, right? So one thing that we can do with a lot of players is we can put this in between their feet to get them to understand how wide or how much width that actually feels like. And for a lot of them, they might come in and say, wow, that looks really wide. But I bet you right now on video, you're watching this, you know that my shoulders are 16 inches wide. And you know that this board is 16 inches wide. My stance doesn't look that extreme when we look at it on video. And what I do have now is I have the stance width to be able to load into my trail side without compromising and getting onto the outside of that trail foot. So I said earlier, there's something that I wish people would stop saying. The number one thing that is that someone's stance is too wide. I think when we look at most golfers have a stance that is too narrow. That can lead to sway. That'll limit the amount of pressure that we can transfer in our golf swing, and honestly, that can actually affect our ability to generate some club head speed in a lot of cases. If you have a wide base, that's not a bad thing. And I don't want you to be afraid of having a stance that's too wide. When you're trying to swing your 6-iron at 90 miles an hour, your driver at 110 miles an hour, when we have a stance that's too narrow, it's very easy to start to sway and slide, because as we're going to try to rotate, we're going to get outside of our feet, and then that stops rotation. That starts that excess lateral movement. So to summarize, I want all of you, especially now that as you've noticed, I've moved indoors here, as we look at indoor season, this is something really simple that you can very quickly measure and that you can train appropriately with throughout the off season. If you don't have the DownUnder board, that's no problem. You don't have to get one. But one thing I do have is I have a Sharpie or a chalk marker, and what you can do is you can take your alignment rod and you can actually put two little marks on here, right? Then you can measure out 16 inches and then put another mark here, so that when you come out to practice, right, you always have your alignment rod down because you listen to your coach, and you should always have your alignment rod down. But now you always know what your stance width should be. Narrow stances and legs that are straight up and down can lead to sway, and they can lead to us losing a lot of power and not being able to rotate. Having a little bit of angle on our legs because we have some stance width gives us something to turn into. So measure your shoulders, and the next time you set up to hit a golf shot, go ahead and get set up to that golf ball and measure how far you are from inside your foot, and you might be very surprised how narrow that number is relative to what you think. But now you have a very simple way for you to measure and to be able to see where your stance width is. If your stance width is too narrow, let's start to widen out a little bit, and let's see if that can give you a little bit more stability, especially if you're a player that struggles with some excess lateral movement. A wide enough stance is a building block to start to reduce that. As always, if you have any questions, please post them down below. Make sure you like and subscribe so when I drop another video, you're the first one to get it, because next week I'm diving into the ultimate workstation indoor in the off season. Thanks for watching, folks.